Nord Stream 2, it is getting into a political level already. What I have to say is that we are missing one permit. We have increased the volume by 1 billion cubic meters per year on top of that. That's one of the best questions you can ask. We will change the product slate. Nobody's talking about the multi-billions investments that will be necessary. We are quite frequently changing suppliers.
How to become a captain?
You are taking more efforts than the rest of it.
Today we are here in Vienna, in OMV head office, and we're meeting Manfred Leitner. Nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for being with me.
Great. So let's start discussing the strategy of your company. And I know that one of the main points for you is to be a stronger presence on the European gas market and petrochemical market. Am I right?
Yes, both is true.
Great. And Nord Stream is one of these activities. Can you comment on this?
Let me start with the strategy that we are having in gas and power. What we defined is the ambition to really become the leading integrated gas supplier from northwestern to southeastern Europe. And obviously we have in some countries production, but at the same time we actually supply a lot of gas from Gazprom export. And Nord Stream 2, I mean, most probably one of the most discussed projects recently, because it's not only seen as an economic project that we are seeing, but it is getting into a political level already, which is not always helpful, let me put it that way, is obviously fitting into that strategy. And because what we see is that if you look just at the facts and leave politics away, then you will find that the gas demand in Europe, in our opinion, will at least be stable, if not growing over time. In Germany, nuclear power will be phased out. The coal-fired power plants will go out at a certain point in time. And in my opinion, it's only natural gas that can replace a lot of that power that has been produced otherwise. And then you just see that the Nord Stream 2 is a direct link between Russia, having the biggest gas reserves in all our surroundings here, into Germany, which obviously will have a growing demand. And at the same time, the European production is declining significantly. We believe over the next 10 to 15 years, and the pipeline project is a long-term project, not only for a couple of years, the import requirements will go up by 100 billion cubic meters, and the pipeline is having a capacity of 55. So there's a lot of room for other, supply sources. And for the customer, we believe it's the best that you have a lot of competition in those supply sources, because obviously this is giving you the best price. So this is exactly one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons why we are supporting the project. We are not having a share in that project. We are having a financing part, as for other European companies are having. That goes for 10%. And actually, I think the project is well underway with some political problems currently that we see.
Mm-hmm. And what is the progress of the project right now?
The progress is, I think the pipes are laid. This is something which is I have to explain that to a certain extent. It will be two lines, 600 kilometers each. So this is all in all 1,200 kilometers approximately, and approximately 50% of that is already laid. So I mean that's a big progress, and the progress is continuing now on a daily basis because those vessels are at work.
Okay, so despite of any political issues, it is still in progress. And when do you expect it to be finished?
That's a very good question. The plan was to put it into operation at the end of 2019. What I have to say is that we are missing one permit. We have got the permits in and all the approvals in Russia, in Germany, in Finland, in Sweden. Everything fine. In Denmark, we have not got the approval so far, or of the permits or of the approval requests that have been done by Nord Stream AG. That's a unique situation for us as well to understand what is the background to it, because there are 3 different routes already applied for by Nord Stream 2 AG. And the first one was placed, I think, in the first quarter of 2017. So this takes such a lot of time, and there is no deadline defined for actually producing that approval. And this is what we still think, the approval is coming within the next couple of months, then there will not be a delay in the finalization of the project. But if this is delaying in terms of getting the approval from Denmark, then obviously there could be a delay in the project all over.
And what do you think about the reasons for Denmark? Do you have any guess on it?
I do not see an objective reason, to be honest, because as far as I can judge, all the routes that have been applied for qualify in terms of technical and environmental characteristics. So this is something where I do not have a good explanation for it.
So no guess
to be honest, the longer it takes, the more we should think about in Europe having a certain reliability to trust the legal framework, first of all. And I think the second topic that is not unimportant as well is to have a certain trust in investing into European companies, because most of the work and most of the services have been in the past, especially as far as the material is concerned for the pipes, have been placed with European companies as well.
Okay, well, and still, I saw your interview where you said that it may be another route through the sea, yes, like a water route, and it will not cause any investment, make it higher. So it will not make investment higher. And could you please tell me, how is it possible? I think it should be more expensive to lay the pipe in the water.
The whole pipe is in the water. This was just a longer route that we have been discussing then, most probably. But if you have such a project in your plans, then what you usually do is, and obviously this has been done in that project as well, you have a certain guess on the project cost, and then you put a certain contingency budget on top of that. So this is something which gives you a certain flexibility, then obviously to stay in the overall project budget. And that's the reason why we do not believe that we will come over that project budget in total.
Okay, and for example, if, I don't know, till the end of this year, Denmark will not give you any permission, when you will decide to use that way, that backup way?
We cannot decide on that. That's exactly the point. Nord Stream 2 AG has now applied for one route, the next one, and now the last one, they have got as a request from the Danish authorities, and they have applied for that as well. So all is now within the governance, if you want, of the Danish authorities, of the competent Danish authorities. We cannot influence their, speed in decision making.
So even that backup way throughout waters, which is not for Denmark, it also requires something from Denmark. Am I right?
The connection that is missing requires the approval by Danish authorities.
Well, okay. And speaking about partnership relations between countries who are participating, what can you say about this?
I think what you see is that there is a number of European companies that have a pretty strong partnership with Russia, especially with Gazprom, Gazprom Export. Especially as far as OMV is concerned, is having with us for Austrian supply, I think the first gas supply, long-term gas supply contract in place starting in '68 already. So we celebrated the 50th, anniversary only recently, And we have in the meantime even increased the final date of the current supply contract to 2040. So we are not only having the longest out of history, we will have the longest in future as well. But there are other companies that have very good relationships to Gazprom, and you see those other 4 European companies that are financing each 10% of the share in Nord Stream 2. And this is something where you have to understand that there is Nord Stream 1 is already in place, is running, and obviously the same companies, more or less the same companies, are or have been even shareholders in Nord Stream 1. So this is just an addition now to Nord Stream 1. OMV is not part of Nord Stream 1, but we are obviously interested in the construction of Nord Stream 2.
Yes, but still looks like you are new in this partnership and new with relations to these companies. So they accepted you well in this partnership?
Absolutely. I think we have the same target. And as long as a group of companies is having the same target, you are aligned, yeah?
Yeah, and no competition between partners?
I mean, competition, the point is that we are cooperating in that project. We are in upstream cooperating with some of them as well. But on the other hand, I mean, since they're selling the same commodity in the same markets we are active in, of course, there's a lot of competition as well in some areas of the business where it is useful to have that competition. But if you can, align forces to support a project like Nord Stream 2, then we are very much aligned there in supporting that.
Great. And you started to say about the Gazprom. So you prolonged the agreement with them. So you have a new agreement for prolonging the terms. Can you say more about this part?
Yeah, we have prolonged our long-term gas supply contract for Austria until 2040 now. So this is a very, comfortable duration as well into the future. And we have increased the volume by 1 billion cubic meters per year on top of that. And I think this is a very, very clear evidence how trustful the relationship between Gazprom and OMV is for the security of supply of Austria with natural gas.
Do you like living in Austria?
Yes, quite a lot.
Why?
Because it's beautiful here. We are sitting, if you look out here, you see Vienna. I live in Vienna. I have been born in Vienna. And I like to be and love to be in Austria. And why? Because I'm traveling quite a lot. And I see a lot of capitals and I see a lot of countries all around. And just to have the best of all confirmations, I always like to come back.
Okay, why? What is the name 3 things you like the best?
I think, first of all, Austria has a beautiful landscape. We have a very high level living style. What I mean is you are secure here. You have, the environment is okay. I think you can move a lot around, and on top of it, there is a lot of cultural offers that you can make use of.
Okay, and you're saying that you are traveling frequently on your business.
Yes.
And how does it influence your lifestyle?
Hopefully not too much. The only thing what I'm seeing is if I go to sometimes Eastern European countries or more remote countries even, it's good to see that people are living in different, standards and different environments. So what I take out of that usually is that I get more grounded, because if you come back, then you see that we have such a high quality of living here that is not the same for everybody.
Okay, and well, still, when you travel a lot, you need to get used to it, and it is influence a person somehow. What kind of influence else can you see on you?
Not a lot of influence, to be quite honest. Yeah, I mean, it's good to see. What I like is to see people living in different cultures, having a different background, different history, and to have a certain comparison to understand where their motivation is coming from, which is sometimes pretty much different from country to country even.
Okay, and name the best country and culture you like, if not Austria.
there's such a big gap behind Austria that I do not want to choose any one of those.
Wow. Okay. Then another question. Name few countries you like to come back to.
To come back to. Usually what I'm doing is I'm traveling a lot in Europe, yeah? And so those countries at least once a year where we have our operations, I'm visiting them anyway. In the past I was in the US. That's not a good example because I do not want really to come back to the US once more.
But still, you're coming back to some country and you just feel yourself good. What is the country?
Italy, for instance, during summer times. Yeah, because this is a country where the way of living is I think, a great one. Yeah, but on the other hand, just for a couple of weeks during the year, and then I would like to come back here as well, because to stay all the year long doesn't make a lot of sense. Otherwise, I mean, good food and I think great, yeah, as a vacation.
Well, you're always saying that Europe will have more demand for gas. And am I right that it is in one line with this energy transition trend? Yes?
As well, what we believe is that gas should play a much more important role and will play a much more important role. First of all, if you look at the CO2 targets in the European Commission, in the European community, then obviously there is a lot of reduction necessary in the future. What we see, and others as well, if you produce power out of coal, you could replace potentially coal by gas. This would mean a 50%, a 50%, reduction in CO2 emissions. So this is already showing that gas is something, or is a commodity, which I believe we cannot do without using more in the future. It has a part even in mobility, because CNG cars are having less CO2 emissions as well. In Austria, for instance, the CNG infrastructure is in place. So there are approximately 160 stations already there. The behavior, for instance, of the driver does not need to change. You need approximately the same time to fill up your car at the station, at the retail station. The mileage is comparable to fossil fuel combustion engines, so there is not a lot of change. And by the way, I think the running costs for the cars are 50% approximately compared to combustion engines. So there is such a lot of advantages as well in private cars that it is difficult to even understand why this has not come to a breakthrough much earlier already.
Okay, but it's not easy to make all the people change their cars to new one.
Absolutely. I mean, how can you make people change their behavior? And I think you have to give them a certain incentive to do that, because otherwise they will not change it. A very clear example for that is currently that in Germany the car producers are very much, persuaded by politics to produce electric cars.
E-mobility.
In e-mobility, exactly, because what they are having is they have a certain target for 2020 to reduce the CO2 emissions to below 95 milligram CO2 emissions per kilometer. And the legislation is set in a way that if they are not complying with it, then obviously they will see penalties for that. And on top of that, the electrical cars is accepted as a zero-emission car. So this means if you have an SUV that you potentially sell, and you sell one electrical car at the same time, you can bring the fleet down to below the 95, whereas more than 40%, I think, of the German power production is coming out of coal, but this is totally left aside. So today, to run an electrical car in Germany on the power mix that is produced doesn't bring anything to CO2 reductions, but it's the other way around.
Okay, so we have gas cars on the one hand and e-mobility on the other hand. And how do you predict what will win?
That's one of the best questions you can ask. And to be honest, this will very much depend on the political decisions, because the car producers have not produced a lot of CNG cars, of CNG cars that I have mentioned before in the past. That was the reason that the customers could not even buy them, because there was not a lot on offer. If you produce cars, then they should have a certain appeal to the customers as well, not only very small cars and so on and so forth. And I think this year this will happen. There will be another initiative so that the car producers will come with a variety of CNG cars. This will potentially have an impact as well on the customers. Why I'm saying politics, the problem that we currently see is that all other alternative fuels compared to a diesel car, for instance, are much more expensive. So unless they are subsidized, right, then the customers obviously will not go for them, because it cannot be, I think, a legislation to forbid a certain type of engines. This would be the other way around. But I think this should not be the case in the European community. So it will depend on where the incentives are most interesting for the customers. And to answer your question, I don't know, but I'm sure that the customers will decide on it and nobody else.
What do you guess? What would you decide?
What I'd decide if I buy a car tomorrow, I would go for a diesel car.
And which one you're driving now? Also diesel?
A gasoline car.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, really. You know, because I'm responsible for refining as well in OMV. And in the past, or in the past couple of years, the challenge for refineries was always, because diesel demand was growing, gasoline demand not. And because I'm trying to be pretty consistent in what I'm doing, I went for a gasoline car just to give an indication to support our refineries.
Okay. And still, if now you're saying that gas cars are better, would you change your car to use gas?
That's a good question. This might happen even. Yeah, this might happen. I could imagine to change from my car to a CNG car. I cannot imagine to go to an electromobility car.
Why?
Because I think it is simply currently not understood what is really the whole complex in the chain from beginning to the end behind. There is such a lot of CO2 emissions in the production of batteries. For instance, you need certain raw material, which, if you look how this is produced in South America or, for instance, in Africa, that's not the way of quality production, preserving the environment there. And finally, I think we do not understand so far how we would recycle the batteries once they are actually coming to, their lifetime is coming to an end. And on top of that, if you look on the flexibility of those cars currently, I would not want to have a charging time of 30 minutes or so to go for the next 50 or 80 kilometers if I'm driving fast. That's something which obviously, unless this is very much improved, I think will still be an obstacle to go for, at least for me, this is one of the biggest reasons not to go for an electrical car.
And the charging station for electrical car, is it enough?
There's a lot of infrastructure missing, yeah? And this is one of the, for me, the most interesting parts of the whole discussion anyway, because nobody's talking about the multi-billions investments that will be necessary to go away from the current, automotive fuels to alternative energies anyway.
Okay, and if there will be more gas cars, how much investment it will take?
For CNG, you mean now?
Yes.
I said in Austria you have the infrastructure available. It's here.
But for car producers, maybe?
For car producers, I think it's more or less the same effort to produce diesel cars than CNG cars. That's not the problem as well. It is just that it was not attractive enough for the customers so far, and has not been marketed and has not been explained in the right way. And CNG is now getting obviously a certain new support because of the climate discussions. Because it's a very, if you want relatively climate-friendly fuel, if you compare it, for instance, to gasoline, much less CO2 emissions, you don't have fine particles if you use that car. So there's a lot of advantages without having to invest, into a big range.
Okay, and if you buy a new car, why you say it's going to be diesel if you support gas?
Because I think the diesel as an automotive fuel has just got a very negative connotation recently or last 2 years, not because of the low quality of that automotive fuel, but because the emission measurement systems in the cars have been obviously not at least communicated in the right way. Let me put it that way. And therefore, now everybody sees diesel as a problematic, commodity if you use it for the cars. I think there is still a lot of potential in that engine if this is further developed or would be further developed. A diesel is emitting 20% less CO2 than a gasoline car, so it doesn't make sense now to go for gasoline cars instead of diesel cars. And I think the fun to drive is highest as well if you go for a diesel car.
Of course. And speaking about diesel car and diesel itself, do you think it's possible to limit these emissions even more for diesel?
Yes, this would be possible, of course, because you have to see the car fleet that is on the street currently. So if you replace cars, very old diesel cars, and they're emitting a lot, by new engines and new cars, that's obviously already reducing a lot. Yeah? And this is what we totally leave apart, because what I'm criticizing is we're looking for 0 and 100, solutions, because we say we are producing a certain car fleet now. We are having certain car fleet on the street. Over time, we will develop now technologies that will then go from what we are emitting to 0, but I do not see any progress so far. Because if you look into the demand, again, the customers, and then you see the diesel demand is to a certain extent still growing, especially in Eastern European, Southeastern European countries. And I do not see a lot of, demand decline even in Germany.
Well, because, for example, in Russia, they say diesel car is more economical ones for you. So you will save money when you have diesel car. Yes. Is it the same in Europe?
Yes, because you consume less. You can drive a higher mileage if you compare it to gasoline cars. And I think one of the reasons is simply, again, that diesel has an advantage versus gasoline, or had an advantage very long, and therefore the research and development was actually invested into the diesel engine, not so much in the gasoline engine. So this is where it comes from. Russia, by the way, would be a perfect country, most probably the perfect country to have CNG in car, because there's such a lot of gas production there and potential future production of natural gas.
Okay, well, in Russia we already have someone who uses yes, so maybe. Okay, another important part of your strategy is internationalization of the downstream and upstream business. Yes. And here is a partnership you want to go further with Middle East and Asia. Am I right?
Yes,
Can you comment on this? Why these regions?
If you look into our downstream oil strategy, and this is what it is all about, is that we see, and I think we're not the only ones, everybody is actually planning for that, the demand for automotive fuel in Europe will go down, for heating as well. So what you have to do here is not to go into higher capacities, but what we are doing is, for instance, in OMV, we try to, and not only try, we will do it, we will change the product slate from those products more where the demand is declining to products where the demand is growing, like jet fuel, for instance, petrochemical products, but there is no growth. And so the only growth we still see in refining, and especially in petrochemicals, is in Asia. That's a very big market, a growing market with growing demand. And because we have developed a high quality of know-how, how to efficiently run a downstream operation in Europe in a pretty difficult environment, the idea was to transfer that know-how into a different place that is in the forefront of growing markets. And therefore, it is, and I'm very much proud of that we succeeded to get 15% in ADNOC Refining just recently. We are not having the closing, we have signed it. The closing most probably will happen in the third quarter of this year. And to acquire 50% in a trading joint venture, in a global trading joint venture, that will have to even be built up now. Yeah, this is in the phase of being founded. And the ADNOC refining system, it's not only one refinery, this is 3 refineries, is the 4th largest refining location production site worldwide. So it's a very high quality production. And obviously, if you can apply, and this is what is the plan, our know-how there, then obviously we see a very, very interesting future for that investment.
Okay, and why have you started with ADNOC?
We have a very clear, I think, relationship even between Austria and Abu Dhabi since long. Mubadala, the foreign investment arm of Abu Dhabi, is owning 24.9% in OMV. We have Borealis, for instance, one of the biggest, polymer producers worldwide. OMV has a 36% share in Borealis, and Mubadala has a 64% share in Borealis. And Borealis is having a joint venture in Abu Dhabi that is called Borouge. This is currently the biggest polymer production site worldwide, where Borealis is having a 40% share and ADNOC is having a 60% share. So you see already a certain combination in cross ownership between Austria and Abu Dhabi companies, if you want. And so it was, I think, just logical that we could come to a transaction again with Abu Dhabi and to go into ADNOC refining. Whereas I have to say it was a pretty, competitive process. So it was not a bilateral discussion. More than 20 companies applied for their share. And finally, Eni and OMV have been successful in getting one.
Okay, and what kind of innovations you want to bring to that market?
That's a pretty good question. We are having an MOU, a memorandum of understanding signed. As you might know, we have developed, or we are on the way of developing, for instance, the recycling of post-consumer plastics here in Austria. This is just a research project still, but we have signed a memorandum of understanding with ADNOC to at least take a feasibility look whether this would qualify to be a part of the sustainability solutions in Abu Dhabi as well.
And again, their first impression, what they think about this proposal?
I think they're pretty excited. We're excited about that, but it will take time because, as I said, it's a research project and research is taking time. We have a pilot plant currently at not a high capacity. It's only 800 tons per year. And this plant is more or less used to stabilize the production process, which is the real challenge to get that under control. If we are successful in doing that, then we will invest into the next stage. That is a plant then having approximately 20,000 tons per year. And this would be the basis. If this is then really working, then we go into an industry scale plant of something like 200,000 tons per year. And this would make a lot of sense already, because this would mean that we replace some of the crude that otherwise you would have to bring from international markets to our Schwechat refinery here by feedstock that is already in the country.
Okay, and Eni is a part of this partnership, am I right? And what kind of interest they have?
What kind of?
Yes, so Eni company is also in this partnership, yes?
In the ADNOC refining partnership, yes.
Okay, and what kind of interest they have? So what they are going to contribute? Do you know?
I think they have the same interest, and each of our both companies do have areas of specially know-how and of expertise. And obviously we will have to design those areas where Eni can have the best input as well as OMV. I think none of those two is the best and perfect in each of those aspects. So I think we will take the best out of the two.
Okay, and what do you think is the best out of each? What can you name?
We are pretty strong, I think, in the management of the end-to-end value chain in downstream oil, for instance. I think Eni is good, very good as well in technology. They are good in project management. We have skills there as well. But obviously what we will have to decide, as I said, and this is still because the closing is only coming, so we are still in the preparation phase, to find out which areas will be best, covered by each of us.
And what can you say about Eni biorefining experience?
I think this is something which is pretty important, yeah, because this is biofuels of the second generation. It's not biofuels that are in competition with food, for instance, because I think this discussion has come to a critical stage. And we should not actually make food more expensive because we produce biofuels for automotive fuels. That's not the right way. So this is a concept Eni has already, to a certain extent, implemented and very interesting.
Okay, so now we are moving to our personal part, and the first question is about football and Bundesliga. Am I right that you're a fan of football?
Yeah, I'm a fan of football, but not that active anymore as a fan than I have been in the past.
Okay, and well, did you play football yourself?
Yes, I have been playing football for 15 years, but in an average talented way, I would call it, because I was just in the third league of Austria, and that was it. But I had to stop then at a certain point because I went into a foreign country for working for OMV.
Okay, so you never had a dream to go to make it as your profession?
Everybody has a dream to do it, yeah, but I mean, obviously it did not work.
Okay, and Austria is famous for its Bundesliga.
I don't know whether we are so famous for Bundesliga. Yeah?
But still,
Yeah.
What can you say about this club? Do you support it?
The Austrian Bundesliga, first of all, I'm really proud to be an Austrian, but not to be proud in terms of football, because I mean our clubs are having not the quality of football than other countries, which is to a certain extent caused by, I think, the development, and a lot of the better players have left Austria and are playing for bigger clubs.
And which is your club? Which is your favorite club?
In Austria, you mean?
No, at all, internationally.
International. I do not want to sound like this is changing from on a weekly basis. Does not, but it was CF Barcelona when they started to have that new style of playing football a couple of years ago, when I think they were coached by Pep Guardiola. In the meantime, I have a tendency more to go to the Premier League clubs like Manchester City, Liverpool or Tottenham, for instance, because they are so consistent. They never give up.
Okay, so you like this
give
quality.
up before the final whistle.
Okay, this is a good quality. And well, do you remember the moment of game where you were really proud of this team?
I was once proud of the Austrian national team, because we have a special relationship, especially as far as football is concerned, to Germany. Usually we lose out all the time, and it was in 2018 when we beat them 2-1. I have to say it was just an exhibition game, so it was not having a big value, but still for Austrians that's a good moment.
You were proud. And well, when you are going to see the next match, any?
I don't plan to see a next match. Maybe the last match I saw was in St. Petersburg, when I saw Zenit St. Petersburg playing. I think they have in the meantime won the championship, or the local championship at least, in Russia as well. Maybe there's a time to see them as well, because there's a great stadium, first of all, and a great team as well.
And why do you like football? What attracts you in this?
That's a team play, yeah. And this is not very different to work, because you have teams here, you have teams there, you have the common target, and everyone is dependent on the other. Otherwise, I mean, you cannot win alone in football. It doesn't work.
So you like this teamwork?
Yes.
Why?
Because if you have a team, you can multiply the impact. If you are alone thinking, then you just have a certain, yes, some are a broader area and can cover a broader area, but it's always better to have more opinions. It's always better to have different dynamics because sometimes the left one will be more dynamic than the right one, and so I think it's all in all it's a better setup to have a lot of forces running into the same direction.
Okay, and what kind of character needed for good teamwork?
Not too much of egoism, first of all. And as I said, a team requires a common target. Otherwise, it's not a team. And a team needs a captain.
How to become a captain?
How to become a captain? Because you are taking more efforts than the rest of it.
And
or
responsibility.
Willing to take more efforts and responsibility.
We started to say about the technologies, and I know that you are planning to invest up to $500 billion, yes, to up to 2025 year to technologies. And one of them is ReOil, which we already started to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's discuss it in more details. Can you tell us?
The real logic is easy. It is just that you take post-consumer plastics, that's polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, for instance, and that has to be collected. It has to have a certain cleanliness, if you want. I mean, it should not be compromised by a lot of different stuff like paper or metals and that kind of things. So one of the challenges is to get the right quality as a feedstock. And the process itself is not that easy and not that simple, but it should work like to take that post-consumer plastic waste and bring it again into a liquid form that is more or less, you can call it synthetic oil, for instance. And this synthetic oil is going into refining again and replacing crude oil that we otherwise would have to supply from other sources.
It can fully replace?
Yes, absolutely. It can replace, not 100%, of course, but as I said, I mean, in 2025, we plan to have 200,000 tons, and that's quite a number already.
Okay, and how can this crude oil, synthetic crude oil, can be used in more details? Can you tell about this?
It will simply go into the crude distillation again.
That's it.
And you just take out products that we are currently producing without that synthetic crude. It would be very great for the Schwechat location here, because here what we are doing is we are running our refinery. We are producing ethylene and propylene. The ethylene and propylene is going over the fence to Borealis. I mentioned that we have a 36% share in that company. They are producing out of that polyethylene and polypropylene. And if you then take the waste after the usage of polypropylene and polyethylene again back into Schwechat refining, this would be a physical circle, and this would be really something which great to see that in the future. So we hope that we will be successful in stabilizing the production process.
So this circular economy, am I right?
Yes.
And you're trying to achieve
in the best sense.
Okay, and why is it important?
It is important because it has a big contribution to emissions and to the climate, of course. First of all. Second of all, most probably not so much in Austria. But you know that plastic waste is one of the biggest problems currently on a global discussion basis. And this would be, if working, yeah, I always have to be a little bit careful because some are thinking we are producing already sensational quantities. That's not the case. But once we are successful in getting the process into a quality that is acceptable, this could be a concept which is obviously fitting totally into the current discussion.
Okay, and I know that you're now using the plastic cups from the airlines.
Yes.
For this pilot plant, am I right?
Yes, from Austrian Airlines.
Okay, and besides of this, what kind of material can be used, and from what place you can take it?
It is whatever was the final product. As long as it is polymers, you can use it. The cups that we are getting from Austrian Airlines as a feedstock for for the ReOil plant. This is a cooperation that we have started. Austrian Airlines is, by the way, one of our biggest customers in the Vienna airport, of course, and is helping both because they can actually have a certain contribution as well to the environment. Yeah, and this is the best way of making use of something which is already used in order to bring it into the process again.
Yeah, I heard they have a green flight strategy for this. Okay, and after you started your cooperation with them, was there any other companies which were also interested to provide you their plastic?
We have a pretty close cooperation, as you can imagine, with Borealis. And so this is something which most probably we will develop in a synergetic way together with Borealis as well. Because if you then connect potentially their products with our needs, then this would be obviously a perfect fit.
Okay, great. And another thing is co-processing.
Yeah.
Can you describe this one?
Co-processing is a process, I believe, that is already to a certain extent working elsewhere in the industry. To make it very simple, the idea of co-processing is not, as we do it today, to take the finished products and then you blend biofuels into the finished product, but to use high quality biofuels already before the crude distillation, and you process the whole together with crude through the whole refinery. What you get is a product which has a much higher stability, a much higher quality, and as well has a much lower CO2 footprint at the same time. This is something which I think has been already advanced in terms of technology in our refinery. We are doing that in the Schwechat refinery as well. We'll need substantial investment, is one part of the 500 until 2025. But I hope we will be there in the foreseeable future even.
Okay, and I saw that for this co-processing, you need to add mixtures, and that these mixtures can have an influence on engine and equipment. Is it like that?
Yes, this is what I mean with a much better stability of the product, because if you mix two finished, components to each other, that's totally different than you process them at the same time through our configuration of the refinery.
Mm-hmm. And how can it be managed?
This is something which we have just to find out where are the challenges still. We know where they are, but this is something which is going, I think, much too more into a technological discussion. But we see where we still are not in the right quality of the process. And we are working on that in order to remove those challenges. And then I think they should be running, as I said, next couple of years.
Okay, and this ReOil is already a pilot plant. It is working on your Schwechat refinery, am I right?
It is working here in the Schwechat refinery. We had invested in that one 10 million euros, so that's an investment already. But it's a low volume currently. It's a low capacity, and the pilot plant is a pilot plant because this should be then piloting a higher capacity. And so what you're doing is, in order to not overinvest already, because we could try to have a 200,000 tons investment today. That's a multi-billion, not billion, it's a few hundred million euro investment. But you don't know whether it will be working. And so the risk is much too high. So this is why you gradually grade up then the capacities. And we are now in the pilot phase. As I said, the next one would then be, a 20,000 tons per year capacity, which is already good. That is already something. And if this is then working in a comfortable way, then we go for 200,000 tons.
And how can you predict when can you make it into industrial scale already?
Industrial scale, if you call the 200,000 industrial scale, which I would do, what we are currently hoping and planning, by the way, if everything is working according to our plans, then this will go in operation in 2025.
Okay, and also biofuels is here, yes, in this question. What can you say about OMV contribution to this part?
What we are currently doing is we are not producing biofuels. we are actually, as all the other refineries, or most of the other refineries in Europe, we are just blending biofuels. We have a cooperation close to our Schwechat refinery here with another company that is buying and producing biofuels, especially biodiesel. And I mean, there are not very many other activities on top of that currently.
Okay, and is there on your future plans? So do you have it on your plans?
Not really, no.
Not yet, because you know you're in cooperation with any company, and they just made two of their refineries a biorefinery, and it is interesting for me. So how an oil company can make such a difficult decision?
No, I mean, if you have refineries that are fit to go into a conversion, yeah, of a new product more or less, which is the case, yeah, then this is something which is a way forward. We have 3 refineries and there is no plan to convert them into biofuels refineries.
So for this low carbon future trend, you have these main technologies like re-oil and co-processing. Is there something else?
No, this is the innovation. There are many other initiatives, but they're at the early stages, I would call them. So this is something which we have to see whether we will follow that up then in a bigger scale, yes or no.
Okay, and when we were discussing your and Borealis relations, you say this phrase across the fence integration. Yeah. Can you say more about this?
Across the fence, I have used because in previous years, the Schwechat location was actually really the same company working on refining petrochemicals and polymers. And only, this is long ago already, but only at a certain point in time, OMV decided not to go into more polymer production, but to give, the polymer part to Borealis and to go up in our ownership there. So we went up from 25% then to 36%. And the polymer part is now with Borealis because they are much better in their technology, polymer production technology. They use the Borstar technology, which is a very well-known, worldwide, I think, accepted technology. And as well, they have a much bigger marketing impact in Europe as well. So this was a very logical decision. But that is exactly why the whole location is just now, to be more separated by just a fence. Nothing else. And the pipelines are already, and of course, going through the fence. So the operations are still very, very much integrated.
Okay. So another part which I want to discuss with you is the Congress participation. What can you say about OMV company preferences in this?
First of all, to be honest, personally, I don't have a lot of time to go for such, events. Maybe too little time to do it because sometimes they are pretty valuable. I think there are many events as long as the topics are the right topics and as long as the participants are, in a complementary way coming together at such events makes a lot of sense because there is a lot of exchange of know-how and experience as well in the oil industry. And where we see it mainly is in refining.
Okay, and what kind of companies you as OMV would like to meet at the Congress?
I think, downstream oil companies, but maybe not only from Europe, because sometimes the level of development is different in even other countries. Sometimes in some aspects they are more advanced already. And it's always to get something which has a certain value back home then from such an event. On top of that, not only oil companies, I believe, there should be companies that are working in the oil industry as a service company, for instance, that have developed technologies already, suppliers for the oil industry, and most probably as well, consultants that are dealing with industry developments and actually looking forward, ideas, because we have such a lot of, so far unresolved issues that there is a lot of, brains needed in order to address them in the right way. And if you combine to a certain extent, then I think this is useful.
And if you meet competitors at the Congress, is it good or not?
That depends on the competitor to a certain extent. I think that's not a problem, yeah? Because if you would have the idea that you should not meet competitors at any event, then we cannot go to any anyway. So first of all, I think the competitors and we as well, we will not give away certain intellectual know-how there, which is proprietary, of course. But at the same time, you can learn from experiences of processes potentially that have already been implemented in some of the refineries, not in all of them, or in the petrochemical part of refining. In the maintenance part, there's so many areas which are very important to run successfully a business in a pretty difficult environment, so that this exchange of opinions and of experiences is I think, pretty necessary.
Can you list for me 5 issues where OMV want to find a new supplier or service provider to help to manage your production challenges?
I do not name 5, I do not name 3, but I can tell you that we from time to time are going out to find new. It's not something where, if you have, for instance, a development partnership with a certain company having a certain know-how, then and this is working in the right way, then you do not want to choose to change anyway. If you think about different areas in refining where you need services, then what we are doing is we are quite frequently changing suppliers, because obviously we are having a certain benefit that there is a lot of competition as well. And this is something which I believe is the same for all the companies that are working in downstream oil in Europe.
Okay, and what wonders of the world impressed you the most?
That's a question. I think, I do not want to name now a number of wonders, because if you look into your surrounding in with open eyes, you will find the first wonder in your garden, most probably, and you will find a wonder that is, in such a distance from your hometown that is having a big global impact. And in between, there are so many. I think you just have to open your eyes. You will find yourself.
That's a good answer. Okay, Vienna is a cultural capital for Europe, and here are lots of artists. Which one is your favorite artist?
My favorite artist. We are pretty lucky there because we have a number. Yeah, we have a big number. If I, coming from Vienna, would take one, I would take Johann Strauss, the son. Yeah, it's a musician. Still an artist, pretty well known, I think, as the guy that has mostly concentrated on the Vienna Waltz, and one of our, I think, most important pieces. This is at the beautiful Blue Danube, coming from him. So yes, I would take him.
Why he impressed you so much?
Yeah, because I think there was such a big impression even outside of Austria. He's very well known everywhere. And during the time when he was living, he was inventing something totally new. Okay, not to compose, pieces, but to compose those special.
Okay, last pieces. Question. What do you feel in your soul when you're listening to his music?
To his music? Yeah. I think it's quite a light music. Makes you happy to a certain extent.
Okay, then another last question. What make you happy?
What makes me happy?
What makes you happy?
If I see that my children are developing in the right way.
We can go to Blitz, another traditional part, which is Blitz. Okay. So you just give me a quick reply, which is in your head. Don't think too much, just reply, okay? 3 professions you consider the most important.
Medical doctors, farmers, researchers.
Why?
Because if you really look at it, what is the highest target that potentially human beings are having? That's health, because you want to get old in a healthy way, and I think the first one is the most important support for that. Farmers, I think the quality of food is a topic as well. That's the reason why. And the last profession that I mentioned is researchers, because this is something which they deal with future, and this is where we will be going to.
Okay, monopoly, is it good or bad?
A monopoly in the industry, or what do you mean by that?
In the industry.
In the industry. I think it is not good if you talk about Europe. You could have two different angles here, because you could look as a monopolist. Then a monopoly is great because you have everything under control. But obviously, I mean, joking apart, I think a monopoly is not good because it's not good for the population. Yeah, because if you look at the monopoly, and I said from the other end, you have everything under control, means at the same time you do not have to change anything, you do not have to develop, you do not have to improve, you do not have to do nothing. So you could have a standstill, and at the same time, nobody would have, any benefits out of a potential development. If you have a big competition, which is obviously the case here in Europe, in our industry at least, there's a tough competition. That's the best for the whole population here.
Okay, if you start your own company, what would it be?
One of my biggest, ambitions are to increase performance as well in that company here. And so, if I would start the company, I don't know whether I would do it, but would most probably analyze companies in terms of performance and find areas where you can improve it, find areas where you can get better, where you can increase efficiency. So it's if you want a consulting company for profitability and performance.
Okay, what habit you would like to get rid of?
The first one that crosses my mind now is I'm pretty impatient, and sometimes I'm saying I would like to get rid of it, but if I'm honest, I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, it can be good.
That makes a lot of ambitions and as well. Maybe if I could get rid of a habit, that's now a special definition, but this would be the habit that that I do not allocate enough time for sports.
Can you describe in one sentence what do you do at work?
Trying to find still potentials to improve our performance overall.
Okay. What are the main, most influential oil companies on the market?
In terms of size, this would be most probably ExxonMobil, Shell, British Petroleum.
And in downstream?
Go back to Europe now in that. Total, Repsol, OMV.
Okay. How does big amount of money influence a person?
I think that depends on the person. I mean, I think if you have a big amount of money and you did not have a big amount of money before, this will refocus your concentration areas, because you do not have to think about anymore whether one restaurant is a little bit cheaper or a little bit more, and you might go to different, places to buy your daily belongings. But I like most those guys that potentially are changing in those areas, but that do not change the core of their values.
Okay, and the last question from the Blitz part: what are your favorite Austrian ruler?
Should be a quick answer, yeah.
Nothing in your head?
I think I go back very much in history here. I would argue Maria Theresia and her son Joseph II.
Why?
Because they have already at their time had a very long-term view on some and even have implemented some of the ideas they created. They are still valid today. I mean, to have a very prominent example, for instance, they've made a lot of changes in legislation in terms of behavior in the population.
The best you like. The best you like.
The best I like is the system that is bringing this high quality drinking water to Vienna.
Could you please tell me who would you pass on this opportunity?
I would like to pass it on to the downstream manager of the nearest refinery to the Schwechat refinery. It's just 50 kilometers away. And I would like to pass it on to Gabriel Szabo, who is the CEO of Slovnaft in the Slovak Republic, where we are running a big retail network. And hope he will enjoy it as I'm doing it.
Okay, back to MOL Group. Why?
I think because this is a competition which is a competition at a pretty high level. And everybody is taking, I think, a pretty good part in it. Still knowing the markets, still understanding what to do, still understanding where to go. So I think it's a tough competition, but at the same time in a very rational way.
Okay, what question do you want me to ask?
Ask him most of those that you have asked me today.
Okay. Thank you so much.